Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nikita. I will be talking about building my own Clojure tools today. So, this is how my setup looks like. So it's Sublime Text, which I didn't write, but everything else in this screenshot is kind of mine, right? So it's starting with the fonts. I'm using my own font, my own color scheme, my own Clojure grammar, my own Clojure formatting rules. I think at some point I'm going to use my own REPL. So far, I haven't done that yet, and there's no good REPL for Sublime. REPL is a must for Clojure development, so this is definitely coming. The rest we'll be talking about. So talk is in 4 parts. Each one covers one of the topics. And this might be a little bit different than usual talk. Like, it's not about some big theme, right? Instead, if it is about many small things, small ideas, but they are like grouped together by this unifying theme, like tools for programming in Clojure. Also, it probably wouldn't learn like new techniques for writing code, but in that sense, not a programming talk, but I think it's important anyways, because like we as developers spend like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in the computer working with text, and it would be nice if you can make this time like a little bit better, right? So this is what this talk is about. It's kind of a design talk in a sense that like given some set of problem or constraints, you come up with a solution. I think it's nevertheless it's important for programmers as well, because like programming is in essence is like design as well, right? You're constantly present with problems, and you must find some solutions. Let me just change that to fit. Yeah, it's better. Okay, so yeah, as I told, there are 4 parts. Each part is different theme. So let's start with the first one, the font, which is Fira Code. You probably knew about it. Many people have used it. Anyone used Fira Code? Yeah. I also saw it in a couple of presentations during this conference already. So yes, it's a really popular font. It's a font with ligature, right? So the idea is a font. It's a font that uses ligatures, but I like to define it as a font that is aware of context, and the context is programming. So it's a font that was designed, and it knows that it will be used for programming, right? That's the main principle anyways. But it has ligatures, of course. So what is ligature? Ligature is like for traditional fonts when you do like shape for each letter, and then in some conditions, some of the shapes don't play well together, right? Like here we have FY, which are like, this place is not nice, and so on. So what font designers do in this case, they just find all these edge cases, and they design how these 2 specific letters are going to play together. In this case, they just reduce FI as a single shape that from the far still looks like FI, but if you look real close, it's a little bit different. So that's the idea, right? So the font designers have been using this for ages, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess forever. You can find ligatures in, I don't know, in stones and stuff. When letters are set in stones, so they use ligatures there as well. But anyways, yeah, so for programming, what does it mean for programming? In programming, we don't have, like in monospace fonts, we don't have this problem with conflicting shapes for all letters. What we do have instead, we have like this weird sequences of symbols like dashes, percents, I don't know, everything that is on the keyboard, on the number pad, right? All these characters are used at some point in some programming languages. And the idea here is it's kind of a pseudographics, right, or ASCII art or something like that. So when in C language you have like this is a dash and greater than sign, but it looks like an arrow, and it's supposed to look like an arrow. Just when C language was invented, there was no way, there was no Unicode, so there was no way to input the actual arrow. So they invented this instead, and we've been using it since. Many languages improved that, like they use much more different, many more different shapes, especially Scala. Yeah, it's they have crazy stuff there. Yeah, but anyways, yeah. So what we can do here is we can actually, using the same mechanism that was used for like font designers for ligatures, we can use that to draw like better shapes. So the idea here is it just looks nicer, right? No big deal, but it won't make your code better, but it just looks nicer, and it's easier to read because like when you read, you see a single character, and you know that even though it takes like 3 spaces here, you know it's something like a single thing, right? You don't have to like parse it and then combine it back together. Same here, like this bracket, this parent with a hash sign. It's also a single thing. So that's the idea. So we use ligatures for that, and for many other things, like for Clojure, it's like that. For other languages, there are many more ligatures. So actually, it's more than 100, I think. Maybe not 100. It doesn't look. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I think it's more than 100. But anyways, yeah, and it's language agnostic, right? So we don't fine-tune the font for specific language. Instead, we use something for every language. So it doesn't matter which language you write in. If you start using Fira Code, you'll probably get something out of it. So some sequences start to look better. Under the hood, as I said, it's using the same mechanism that font designers been using. So you just basically write this small program. So inside font files, there is like a small language interpreter, or it's like pattern matching language, something like that. It's very primitive, but you can do like replacements and stuff like that, conditions sort of. Yeah, and so in this case, you just tell it that if you see hyphens and greater than greater, then replace it with a single glyph that is like this nice-looking arrow. So that's basically the whole font is these new shapes and bunch of these commands. And yeah, and editor supports that. Most of text output libraries, if they're good enough, like they support that. So you can use it almost everywhere. But that's not all. So when I so it doesn't end here, right? So Fira Code is actually doing something more for programming. And the second idea that the second thing that does it fixes spacing, right? So spacing is also a problem in traditional fonts. If you imagine that each letter is like some shape in a box, right, which fixed dimensions. It kind of is for most letters, but then if you don't see these boxes, so here on the top you can see that because of the shape of the letter, there are like additional space between them, and the word looks like it falls apart, like it's multiple words, right? You don't know, is there space between them? What's going on? Why these letters are so far away from each other? So to fix that, you actually have to find all such pairs and manually adjust the spacing between them. So in this case, AV pair, like as you can see, if we make the space smaller between this specific pair, it starts looking like it's normal, right? So to make it look as it should, you actually have to apply like a lot of trickery to get there. This is called kerning. The kerning tables are pretty big, so these are all possible combinations. This is starting point, right? You can do more, obviously, if you like, depending on who you are, like how much time do you have. But this is basic kerning table for fonts, so it lists each possible pair between characters that possibly needs space adjustment. Luckily for us, we don't have that problem in monospaced fonts because each space is actually it's taking up this specific space. We don't adjust spacing. We don't want to font become non-monospaced because programmers use the monospaced fonts, and most editors also expect font to be monospaced. What we do instead, we still find the pairs of characters that you might find in your program, but look less perfect than they could. And in this case, for example, in Clojure, there's often you see double colon, right? And if you look here at the top one, you can see that well, it doesn't look nice. It looks like the left one falls apart, right? It doesn't look like they belong to the same key. So we just spacing a little bit, so the both columns now looks like it's a single thing. And yeah, they still monospace, so we don't mess with that, but together it still looks nicer, I think. There's another example. So here also like stuff like this is like this, here vertical spacing is adjusted. It's still monospaced again, but like it looks like it's centered, right? And it looks much nicer. Yeah, and this is like a problem specific to programming fonts, because like in normal texts you don't usually see like colon and equal sign. The colon you see in normal text, like I don't know, paragraphs, articles, stuff like that. Equal sign comes from mathematics. They don't really appear together, so nobody in like in normal fonts pays attention to that. But in programming we have those, so we have to take additional care. There's another example. This is from different font, Monaco, I think. Yeah, so you can see this dash is not aligned with greater sign, which is, I don't know, you might not care. I care when I see that. It's like, it looks terrible, I think. And the star is not aligned again because it's like it's designed for upper space, specifically for letters, for digits, sorry. And if you use that along the lowercase identifiers, it's like looks out of place. So, yeah, this is like all the symptoms of the font designed for normal text, for mathematics, but not for programming specifically. So yeah, the Fira Code tries to fix that. Like as much cases as we could find, we try to fix them, right? So on the left is like before adjustment, on the right it's after adjustment. As you can see, we also pay attention into for uppercase, lowercase characters. We recenter actually colons, dashes, stars for uppercase and lowercase characters, stuff like that. It's like, I don't know, I think it's a good thing to have in the font. Also, like we live in modern world, as I said, like ligatures, the idea of ligatures came from a font, well, from specific combinations of letters appearing together in a font, right? In texts. So if some combinations never appear together, nobody cared to build a ligature for them. In modern world, we have www, so I thought it's a great opportunity for ligature because we often see them together. So yeah, you can do something like that. And Fira Code actually has this. This is mostly for fun, but I think it's a fun part. We can also, for list programming, when you have these closing parents, like and you have multiple of them, we can display instead, like replace them with a single glyph, which has this dot indicator, like how many parents you have. So it takes less space, and you don't have to like count how many there are here. This is a joke. I don't actually do that. Yeah, but I can. But yeah, I don't do. But it's totally possible. It's totally possible. So you can program font like that. But anyways, yeah. So Fira Code, it's on GitHub. It's free. So if you might want to try it out. Yeah, it's a good font. It's good for programming. It's a good font on itself. So it's just a nice monospace font as well. And this is it for the first part. The second part is about colors. So yeah, color scheme, right? What's wrong with color scheme? So yeah, as I said before, in Sublime, I use my own color scheme. It's called well, Alabaster. I'll like give a link later. But the idea is that I don't really like how syntax highlighting works in most editors, like in most color schemes, right? And I have multiple problems with that. The first one being they use too much color, right? So on this screenshot, you can see like everything is highlighted, but the result of that is like it's the same as nothing is highlighted. You can't highlight everything, right? Something highlighting by definition is defining that something is more important than everything else, right? And you cannot, if you highlight everything, it's just a mess and a rainbow and I don't know, fireworks, but it's hard to read, and it's also hard to figure out what is important here, which part should I pay attention to, which I shouldn't. Also on this screenshot, it was actually so bad that I tried to find the default text color, which they use like without any highlighting. It's really hard to figure it out. It has, I think, one word here like require is gray. Everything else is like highlighted by different rules. So if you replace that with normal highlighting, that what I call normal, right? So it becomes, you can notice that now you see some things are highlighted, like more elevated. They stand out, right? And everything else is just normal text, which you can still read, of course. So the idea is here, here I highlight like function name, some identifiers and strings, right? So if you're looking for a string, you know that you need something green, and there is not much else besides green and some blue and some text, right? So it's really easy to find that green. And if you need something blue, it's also easy to find it because nothing else is highlighted, basically. If everything is highlighted, well, it's much harder to find like green in here. Yeah, that's the first idea. So do not highlight everything, highlight some parts, but very few of them. The second problem I have with traditional color schemes is how many rules they have. This is a screenshot from IntelliJ idea, I think. So on the left, you see this panel with a tree, right? And it has like, I don't know, 15, 20 different items. They are all topics of a color scheme. So each item, menu item here, you click, you get another window with, I don't know, 30 plus different rules that are related to this like language in this case. And like in the end, you have, I don't know, hundreds, thousands rules. I don't know how many are there. There's a lot, right? And this is, well, this creates two problems. First, it's really hard to implement such scheme like in a meaningful way, right? And this is why, for example, if you go for color schemes for Sublime or Atom or something like that, there's like myriads of them, right? If you go for color scheme for IDEA, there are just few, and most of them are developed by JetBrains themselves. But actually, there are two they're shipping, I think. Yeah, there are three they're shipping them. They can't even develop them themselves. Right, and this is the first problem. The second problem I have with that is when you have so many rules, you cannot possibly remember what they mean. So let's say you see something like this is a purple bold keyword with green underlines, and there's like italic expression with just normal underline, black, right? What does it mean? I don't know. It means that something was parsed, I guess, in some way, but it doesn't really tells me what it's supposed to. Like maybe it was, I don't know, Java anonymous class declaration or something like that. I don't know. Like it's really hard to remember all that. And it reminds me of the scene in TV show Louis when they like find this parking sign. And yeah, it kind of makes sense. Each part of it makes sense together. They don't make any sense at all, and it's like it's contradictory, and yeah, it just fails to communicate what it should communicate. Especially this green circle. Yeah, it's very strange. So yeah, too many rules it doesn't make any good for color scheme, I think. And too many rules. When you have so many rules, you have to like. So imagine you have to highlight 1,000 different things in your code, right? Some of them, well, are different languages, but even in the same language, 100 things in your language, right? So I guess they decided that, okay, we will going to use every possible means we can. Like we will use colored font, underlines, italics, bold, what else? Yeah, I think that's it. They use also different type of underlines sometimes, and background, of course. Yeah, it's not on this screenshot, but they use background as well. And well, the problem with too much decoration is, well, you cannot actually read it. It makes text hard to read, right? So, yeah, well, you see like regular text, then it switches to italics, then it switches to bold, then it switches to colors, then it switches back to bold but underlined, and so on. It's really like gets in your way, right? It's hard to read when you try to. yeah, if you switch it back to like without all that, so it's just normal text without any bold, italics, underlines, you just restrict yourself, for example, only to backgrounds, right? It becomes much more readable, I think, and you start actually see that there are words. They're not just like colored rectangles. They are words, and they have like letters, and letters have shapes. And guess what? Like font designers designed letters so that they're actually easy to read. You just don't have to mess with them, right? When you don't mess with them, it's perfectly readable, and it's really easy to scan as well. So too much decoration is bad. And this is how I came up with my color scheme. So it has one principle, well, kind of one, maybe several principles. Just to use as few rules as you can remember, right? In my case, it's just 5 rules. Here, it's like I only highlight 5 different things. One being compile time constants, which are like numbers, Boolean, true, false, constants, I don't know, instance, UIDs, stuff like that. The other one being string likes, like string, regexpand, single character, stuff like that. The declarations, like top-level definitions of classes, functions, namespaces, stuff like that. The name itself, right? Not everything. And the comments, right? And punctuation is like just grayed out a little bit. So yeah, and there are so few rules you can actually remember when you see a screenshot. You can actually remember what they mean. And I can actually write this down like from memory. So I didn't look it up when I made the slide. So I just can do that from memory. And yeah, when you look at the code, you actually understand. If you see a word highlighted, you can actually understand why it's highlighted, why it's important. And also, most of the code is black, as you can see here, right? So it's just normal text because it's like, well, it's normal text. Some of the constants are highlighted. For example, there's keywords are highlighted here, right? And well, not much else here, but sometimes a string are highlighted as well. Yes, strings and top-level definitions is here. So yeah, but most of the code is black, and it's perfectly fine actually. You think it might be strange and uncomfortable, but it's actually really nice to see black on white text without like italics, bold, and all that bullshit. The other idea that I have here is to highlight comments, right? So I don't know, but for some reason, most of the color schemes try to use gray text on comments for some reason. So they try to hide it out. Maybe the reasoning is like if it's a comment, it doesn't get compiled to machine code, so it's less important, so let's hide it out. I think that it's actually backwards, right? So the other way around. So if your code is hard enough that somebody decided to put a comment next to it, then probably comment is more important than like the code itself. So my principle is to highlight the comment with, in this case, with yellow background. Sometimes I just use the red text if I cannot use a background. Yeah, and it works really nice for Clojure. At least with Clojure, we don't try to leave meaningless comments. It might not work as well for Java, for example, when they generate comments. And I think it actually, the idea to hide comments comes from I don't know, Java, OOP or something, community enterprise. I don't know. When they just generate comments that says that this param is just param and please pass param as this param, something like that, which yeah, is obviously shameful, and you should try to hide it. But for meaningful comments, it's better to highlight them, right? It makes them visible. Yeah, here's another thing that I do. The top-level definitions, they are just like make when you have like a huge file open, or you can see where function starts and where the next one starts, right? So you just make it easier to navigate. The other color schemes do that too, of course, right? But I just want to point out here it works because nothing else is highlighted. So nothing else is actually like have color or background, and because of that you can actually see that stuff, the important stuff, the stuff that you want to see. And that's it. So this is a color scheme that I use. It's called Alabaster. It has multiple implementations for different like editors. It's also really easy to port to if you want it for Atom, I don't know, or what's missing here, Emacs, right? It's really easy to copy. It has just 5 rules, so yeah, it's really easy. Check it out if you want. Yeah, I think I've been using it forever and really happy with it. Okay, the third part, the grammar. So the grammar is the grammar is a set of rules that parses the code that you have in your editor, and well, basically use it to highlight it or to probably extract some I don't know, symbols and definitions and build some, I don't know, indexes, tables or something like that. But you know, just the main purpose is probably just to do highlighting, right? And this is specific to Clojure. So because I work with Clojure, I don't do that for other languages, but it's not specific to a specific editor. So my problem with Clojure grammars is that they're not specific enough. They actually try to match common cases, but they don't try to match edge cases for some reason. I don't know. Maybe people who build them were not like careful enough or something like that. So here I have like a small example, like example of Clojure file that defines some weird things that should work but doesn't work necessarily all the time. So like, and here we see, if you open this in Visual Code, you see that, for example, this identifier that has this prime sign at the end, right? Visual Code doesn't know that it's actually a valid part of the identifier. And if you use them, I actually like to use them. I don't like to like have x2. I like to have x prime when you have like modified x. Yeah, and it doesn't help you. It doesn't highlight it for you. It doesn't like select it when you try to select it. It's just a mess. Right. Next is keyword with a number. It seems okay. Keyword with a colon seems okay as well. Keyword with Unicode symbols here, it's not okay, right? It doesn't know that it's possible, even though it is possible by Clojure standard. I don't know. Yeah, Clojure. Okay, it's possible in Clojure. It works in REPL. So yeah. Octal characters also doesn't know about it. It knows about big ints and so on. So it's a bunch of weird stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And well, the problem I have with that is I want my tool to be reliable, right? So if it helps me, if it tries to help me, it must work like, it must really help me. Just not like, if it highlights something for me, but like in 90% of the cases, it's not good enough, I think. And it's not like a huge problem. It's really easy to fix, right? So. I just don't want to spend extra brain cycles when I see something in my code not highlighted when it should. I start thinking, why it's not highlighted? Like, is it wrong? Is it the code wrong or something? But no, it's just like implementation. It tried to help, but it failed, and now it creates like additional thinking opportunity for me, which is not great. It should be brainless. So yeah, the IntelliJ idea, it's supposed to be better, I think, because well, I think they don't use regular expressions for grammar. I hope they use something better, I don't know. But it's still not good enough, right? So in this case, we also see it doesn't know about Cyrillic keywords, about octal characters, about begins. And also tries here, you see the data script / something. It tries to, so it's a warning, and it tries to warn me that this namespace doesn't exist. It actually shouldn't exist. It's not required by Clojure to exist, so I can use tag literals with namespaces that I own, but they don't actually represent an actual namespace. It still tries to resolve it, which is, well, yeah, it's not helpful either. So, and if you open your project and you see like such warnings, they just get in your way, right? They don't help at all. Emacs is not perfect either. Yeah, well, here, I haven't tested Emacs that much, but you can see that it doesn't highlight keywords with numbers, and the rest the rest of it is more or less fine as far as I can see. I don't know, maybe it should be highlighting numbers, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't. Actually, it was, I'm not a Max user, it was hard to set up, so this is what I get, So idea is, if you build something that, like build a grammar into your editor that's supposed to help you write code, right? It would be great if it was like as precise as a compiler or as close as it can get to. So it will report you actual things, actual problems. So you see something is not highlighted properly, and you know that maybe I shouldn't run this code because I can see already that it has a problem, right? So it shouldn't parse what should. Okay, so yeah, principles are no false negative, no false positives, like don't parse what shouldn't be parsed, parse what should be parsed, and yeah, just test it and don't be lazy. And it's actually really simple to implement something like this for Sublime. It just took a couple of days, and I cover most of the Clojure spec, Clojure language spec, Clojure syntax, I don't know, yeah, and EDN syntax as well. Well, yeah, I can also, well, Clojure and EDN are not actually well defined, I think. Well, they are well defined, but there's like gray area between, for example, by EDN specification, for example, you can't use like regexpress in it, right? But by Clojure implementation of EDN, you totally can. So implementation actually does much more than the specification allows, and people, of course, are using that. So it's not clear whether you should highlight stuff like that or not. So yeah, I just do. Yeah, and another idea here is like when you set up to parse stuff like that, you can actually find edge cases before like compiler finds them, and you can help user correct them even before they run the program, right? So in this case, for example, we can, when parsing regular expressions, you can actually report errors if you can see them. So for example, if you use /p, \p, there are no spaces allowed. So if you see space inside these parents or braces, right, it's obviously incorrect, so why not highlight it? And also here you see unbalanced parent inside the regex. So I'm kind of proud of that, so I can highlight that much. Yeah. And this is like my my grammar. So it's called Sublime Clojure. It's in this repository, and most of the stuff that I tested on is parsed with it, obviously, right? This is a small subset. I have probably 10 times more tests for it. Actually, this is just for the show. Yeah, this is also, by the way, there's a nice example here. So you see there's 0, 1/2, right? And this is considered incorrect number by Clojure spec, but it actually works in REPL. So I'm confused what to do here. So yeah, like maybe it should work, maybe it shouldn't. Yeah, this concludes the part 3, and the last part, the fourth part, is the Clojure formatter. So formatter is well, it's basically the rules to format your code, like so to indent your code, like how many spaces you put between the forms, basically. And the story starts here from with Daniel Compton. He started a thread on Clojureverse about whether Clojure should get something like gofmt or not. If you don't know what gofmt is, it's a de facto Go formatter. It gets shipped with the Go language itself, right? I think they require all codes that get published to the main default repository for Go code to be formatted with it. So it's like enforced on everybody, right? It has no options whatsoever, so there's no options. You just like gofmt, your source file, and you get the result. You probably won't like the result, but the fact that everybody uses the same convention, it's really been really helpful for Go community. And at first, you might be offended by this idea and by its style, but then you you learn that having no options just gets you, you just don't think about it, and it's a solved problem, move on, right? So it's one less problem to solve. So Daniel asked if we should get a formatter such a gofmt for Clojure. Yeah, probably we should, right? How would it look like? Well, we already have Clojure Style guide, right? So Clojure Style guide written by Bozhidar Batsov. It is de facto Clojure standard, right? So everybody uses that more or less. Yeah. But then we have also okay. So Clojure Style guide is in a form. It's a wiki page, right? So it's just a bunch of text with examples, which for human consumption. So it's not programmable. You can't enforce it, right? So there is CLG-FMT that I believe tries to implement this Clojure Style guide, but in code. So you can actually format Clojure code with it. It's from James Reeves, and it comes with default settings that match this Clojure Style guide as good as they could. Right? There's also some Emacs default formatting. I'm not sure. I know that it's a little bit different for CLG-FMT because I once worked in a company when our CTO asked me, okay, I see you don't format your code. Please go and format your code with CLG-FMT. I'm like, okay, downloaded CLG-FMT, push the code on, and he asked why your code is not what is supposed to be. And turned out he was using Emacs formatter, not the CLG-FMT. So yeah, it's different in I don't know some small ways. There's also zprint, which is does kind of what CLG-FMT does, probably much more of it. I'm not sure. There's also FIP and many other options, right? So if we want to agree, we will definitely agree on some of those. Or would we? The problem with Clojure Style Guide is that it's a bit too vague, right? So it has words like optionally, exception, where feasible, and stuff like this. So it's a good thing for people read this and then make your own judgment. It's fine, I guess, but it's not. It won't work as default format tool, right? It has to be programmable. The other problem with it and with its implementations is that they try to make Clojure code look good by implementing lots and lots of different rules, right? So here is list of rules in CLG-FMT. So there's 67 rules, which are all the different forms that I don't know they can think of. They're listed here, and everything else is formatted with some different rules, right? And you can get this as far as you can. So for example, on the right is zprint, which has, I don't know, twice as much rules as CLG-FMT does. And you can obviously have even more because there are infinite number of libraries, right? And many of them might require specific formatting. The other problem with it is that it actually, the Clojure Style Guide, this is the cornerstone of it, and also the biggest problem with it is that it relies on you to know whether something is a macro or is a function, right? So, well, yeah, it kind of it has a rule that says if it's a macro, use 2 spaces here. If it's a function, use a line on the first argument. So as many spaces as you need to align with the first argument. Or, well, yeah, something like that. If it's a macro that defines something plus some other macro, so it's really unclear what the set of these rules are, but it either requires your access to the runtime, so you can identify, or it requires a wide list of every possible form, which is obviously not going to work for universal formatting tool, right? Yeah, and so the problem is really, really tricky. So imagine we have a tool like that, right? Having it would mean that it would be it would need to be implemented everywhere, like in different editors and different environments, like in a browser, in a JVM, in JavaScript, in Electron, I don't know, right? It means many different versions, and it means you cannot really update it. So for example, when a new Clojure comes up, new Clojure version comes out, James Reeves can just go to his file and update his rules, right? And add some new rules if some new forms were added to the Clojure core. But with universal formatting library, you cannot really do that because you don't control everybody who is like implementing those rules, right? So it's you just get one shot at it. You just release the specification. After that, like implementations, but you don't get to update it, right? There's no versions. It's not universal if you have like multiple variants of it, and somebody formatting it with the old version, somebody is formatting with a new version, and now they have different formatting, which is like not what we wanted. We wanted it all be the same. And of course, world is open, new libraries get written, new editors get written, like language itself changes. So for example, in my recent memories, it's like to Clojure, a couple of macros were added to Clojure core. Even reader conditionals were added to Clojure core, and of course this formatter tools, they didn't know about it, so for some time I had to like manually reformat when I use when_some instead of when_let, because they knew about when_let but didn't knew about when_some. So yeah, no, language is not stable either, right? It's actually easier for Go because a language doesn't change, or does. Yeah, so how do you approach such a problem? So how do you design a tool that will be will work for now and for all possible future libraries and changes to the language? Well, you get remove as much special cases as you can, right? You make it as simple as it gets. You cannot rely on whitelisting, exceptions, runtime dependency, and yeah, just a few rules applied uniformly. And it looks like you can actually reduce everything we have in Clojure style guide just to 2 rules, right? The first one is just use this formatting with 2 spaces everywhere, instead of just like just using it for a macros or specific list of macros. Just use it everywhere for functions, for everything. Yeah. So you just use two space in that. And if you are not calling a function, if you instead like have a list or have a map or have a set or have a like reader conditional form, you just align to the latest unclosed bracket, right? So if bracket was here or parent was here, you like align to it. It was, yeah. The one exception in here is if your list doesn't have a symbol in the first position, you want to use a single space here, like it's not a function called macro call, so yeah, you format it as a list. Now it's a data structure. It also plays nice with parinfer, so yeah, it's also like tools friendly. And this is it. So if you take like these 2 rules, you don't need any like special listings for like special form formatting. You don't need actually anything. You just need these 2. They like can be implemented, I don't know, really easily in any possible editors. You don't have a list of rules to update, a list of exceptions to update, right? It will work for everything, everywhere, for now and forever in the future. One bonus that it adds is because we don't use this format of aligning forms to the argument, like this is Clojure style guide on the top. So because we don't use that, we just use 2 spaces now. We don't have this problem of nesting really getting really far ahead, like to the right? So with this type of formatting, if you have like long function name, your next form will be like moved way too much to the right? And this is not a good thing, I think, in my opinion, because like it's only nested 1 level deeper, but it's way far to the right. And when you scan the code, you don't understand why is this form like so far ahead on the right. Is it like so deeply nested? It isn't, right? So actually the shape of the form like as you see it on the screen, and actual structure of the code is different, is in conflict. So they communicate different things. It's like mixed message. The contrast in our system, we don't have this problem. So yeah, it's much more nicer, and it saves you space. This thing, it doesn't exist as an implementation yet. I think it must be quite easy to implement, but I haven't tried it yet. So I have a blog post that actually has this explained with all the motivation and stuff like that. But yeah, in detail, you can read it here. And this is it for formatting. This is concludes my talk. Some closing thoughts. So, well, yeah. So yeah, I love writing my own tools, right? So I like being able to program in an environment, and I can fine-tune and be happy how it behaves exactly as I want, right? So it has been a huge boost for, I don't know, not productivity, but probably programming happiness or something like that for me. Yeah. And you should try it too, right? It's not that hard. It's actually really easy. And you see something you don't like, you just go ahead and fix it, and now you have something better, and you make every working day a little bit better for the rest of your life. So why not? Remap your keyboard, submit a patch to language grammar if you see something isn't parsed as it should, right? Write your own color scheme, add ligatures if you, well, yeah, it's also easier. So thank you for your attention, and well, yeah, thanks. Any questions? Yes?
So, thanks for your talk. That's very interesting. So, a similar-ish thing I did was with printing out numbers. I tend to have a lot of numbers in my programs, and so like I would print them out in scientific notation. So like 1 million would be 1 E6. That was the best I came up with. It was still not brilliant. I just wondered if you thought about numbers and their from a readability point of view.
About like 1 E6, how it reads?
So in like scientific notation, just 1 E6. That means 1 times 10 to the power 6. So I can quickly see that, right, there's 6. So I know I'm talking millions.
Yeah.
Right, and 2.3 E6. So that's 2.3 million. That kind of thing, rather than having loads of zeros and numbers, and it's just one digit is going to make a big difference.
And do you mean like you like it or you don't like it?
Well, so I find like a big long number.
Yeah.
It's just very difficult to read, and easy to make mistakes with. So that's the problem I was trying to solve by switching all the printing of those to scientific notation.
Yeah, sometimes I'm not sure if it's possible in Clojure. I've seen some languages they allow you like to type numbers like this. Oh, it's really small, right? Let me just restart it. Clojure supports it? Yeah, well, I think, yeah, I don't think Clojure does, but this might be a solution, I think, right? No?
It's one disclosed,
yeah. Is it what you're talking about? And yeah, Clojure doesn't support it. Okay, yeah.
So a question about Fira Code. Is it possible to like have just the spacing stuff and not the ligatures? It's like is it trivial to hack that? Because I really like the spacing, but I don't like ligatures personally in my code because I like seeing the characters.
It is kind of possible. So right now, yeah. So like right now, Fira Code is basically like a bunch of ligatures thrown together. All of them are independent, right? So they don't depend on each other. So in theory, you can remove some and leave some. And the spacing stuff is partially implemented as ligatures. partially not. So you can actually, well, I don't have a nice tool for that, but in principle, you can go to a glyphs file, cut off every ligature from there, and just recompile the font. Recompiling doesn't require you to open it, but to edit the font, well, there's like this glyphs app that I used to open it. So the idea is, in theory, if you like really care about it, you can go open this Fira Code font. Let me just show you how it looks in a text file, right? Because it's just a text file in strange format. What? I think it's okay. One more attempt, and you just remove everything some way from there and recompile it, and yeah. So somewhere in this text file there are like definitions of ligatures. Well, it's a little bit messy than I expected, but in theory, yeah, it's possible. I'm hoping that someday I will build like web tool where you just like can click ligatures you want and unclick the ones you don't want. We actually have a sort of like compile pipeline set up right now, so we can compile from source. So the rest is what's the rest is like just build this interface. Yeah, it is possible, but it requires you to rebuild the font.
Okay, but I could do that myself.
You can, yeah.
Are they tagged in any way, like the difference between the spacing stuff and the?
No, not really. So it's if you see, so this is for example less greater, right? So this is like proper ligature, and this one is, for example, colon. It's just also a ligature. So yeah, you just have to guess by the names, I guess. So, yeah.
What are your thoughts on like aligning pairs of things? So probably the best example would be a let block, like with a lot of let bindings. Do you?
Oh yeah, I totally do that. I'm not sure how to make it into the spec actually, so I decided to leave it out. But I totally do that all the time. Yeah. I think it makes code much more readable. The problem with it is that when you have, I made it way too big, right? Let's have, yeah, like this, right? So these two are aligned. Yeah? Yeah, I think it's a good thing. The only problem, like, I wish that was in a spec. The only problem is if you have something really, really long here, I don't really want this to push like here. So I just thought that maybe I leave it out and the people will do that themselves. As long as tool doesn't destroy this, I think we should be fine. Okay.
Hey, I like the idea of separating the rendering of the ligatures from the actual underlying text. Have you thought of trying to solve the formatting problem that way too? Like sort of instead of having a formatter for everybody, storing the text in some arbitrary format, and everybody having their own format render that they see. Like, so I can see it this way, you can see it that way, and we can have our own independent worlds and not care. Like, have you thought of this? Is it a terrible idea? It just occurred to me now.
Every time your editor opens it, it formats it for your version.
Exactly.
And every time you commit, it standardizes it back.
Exactly, yeah. Is that feasible, you think?
That's both worlds.
Yeah, it could be.
Just not solve the problem.
It's a perfect solution that doesn't exist yet for some reason. So I keep that. The idea with tabs was like that, right? So you set your tab width to your preferred width, and everybody can see the code they prefer. But only it turned out to be a mess because tab is also invisible character, and now part of the code is formatted with tabs, part is with that. But yeah, I hope in future we will be programming not in text but in some, I don't know, shapes or something like that, and we will be able to see the code that we want the way we want to. But for now, it's just plain text, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
That would be great. I think the guys at IntelliJ have experimented with, they have metaprogramming system. That's an editor that lets you define your own your own symbols to code, and it looks more like mathematical expressions than the code. And I think they don't have plain text at all. So when you open any source file, it's in this rich text format or something like that, on IST3, something like that. It's not text. So it's been tried, but it didn't get any popularity, unfortunately. Anyone else? Oh.
You mentioned that Fira Code is in IntelliJ. I don't know if you mentioned that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's also actually built in Fira Code. You can use it in Sublime, in IntelliJ, Atom, VS Code. What else is there? Emacs, I think, if you run console Emacs, it's terminal definitely can do that. If you run GUI Emacs, there is a hack to do that. I don't see there's anything for Vim. I'm not sure, but yeah, you can do that. Yeah. Actually, Sublime. I started my when I started coding in Clojure, I started with Sublime. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. It didn't support ligatures then, and then I came up with the idea for this font, and I moved away from Sublime because it doesn't support ligatures. Now it does, and I can finally come back and code in it. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you for your attention.